Welcome, everybody. Really good to see you at Leicestershire's third Cycling, Walking and Wheeling Forum. My name's Lee Quincy. I'm Head of Service Network Management in the Environment and Transport Department at Leicestershire County Council. Really pleased to welcome you here in the council chamber, but also to those of you online. I hear there's lots of people online. I do apologise for the slight delay. We just had a little bit of a delay with people arriving, but the good news is we're all here now. Now, before I go any further, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill, but if we do, there are some fire exits just behind you or out behind me here to the left, down the stairwell, and then if you can congregate on the visitors car park. But as I say, we're not expecting a fire drill there. If you need a comfort break, the toilets are just out the back here to the left down the corridor and on the left hand side there. So if you do need a comfort break, please feel free to go ahead. Okay, so when we met last year in September, we faced quite a number of unknowns, mainly with the new government coming in and being recently elected, and there was a lot of anticipation around some of the funding announcements that we might get for active travel. Now, since then, the Chancellor has announced 100 million of capital funding for active travel in England, which is really good news. But while we're waiting to see what that meant for Leicestershire, we've been busy in the background working on a lot of things as well, namely developing our local transport plan 4. And that sets out our vision for transport to 2050. We've also been continuing with our programme of local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, and we've been making real good progress on those. I'll call that LC WIPs. I'm sure you're all familiar, a lot of you are familiar with that. We've also been developing what is now known as our new multimodal area investment plans, otherwise known as MAPES, which you'll hear a little bit more about a bit later on in the presentations that we're given today. So, as well as that, we've also been delivering various incentives and initiatives across the county, such as the £300 e-bike scheme, which continues to be a success, and that's going to run through to autumn of this year. And work is also continuing in our schools. Grants have been awarded across the county, contributing towards projects including cycle training and active travel provision. We're also working on delivering a scoot ability programme, as well as bike maintenance courses. So quite a lot going on with schools. We've also trained over 3,500 children through our bike ability programme this year, as well as educating over 2,000 pupils as part of our new road safety education programme. Now, really pleased to let you know as well, we've just been awarded some more bike ability funding. That's going to allow us to train even more pupils into 25-26, up to the tune of 6,000 more. So that's really positive. So really pleased to actually finally get that confirmation of funding to enable us to do that and get the tutors in to deliver those courses for us. Now, our senior sustainable travel officers are all now ride and walk leader trained as well. And they'll be looking to work with districts to develop a programme of activities going forward. Now, on top of that, active travel, I mean, I did see a question around percentage of spend on active travel, and it's a very difficult one to answer. But active travel, in reality, is embedded pretty much into every bit of highway expenditure we do, you know, from maintenance of our roads, footways, public rights of way network, to the provision of our school crossing patrols and the various behaviour change initiatives we deliver, like school streets. So to put a percentage on it is very difficult, but in short, we're spending a lot of money, which all has active travel embedded into it. Now, in February, we got some really good news. It was announced that we would receive an Active Travel Fund 5 allocation of just over 425,000. So that's really good news. And to top that off as well, we were told that we would get just over 1.4 million from the Consolidated Active Travel Fund, which will combine activities previously funded by the Active Travel Fund and the Capability Fund. So that is ultimately going to be focused on delivering activities, active travel programs, including the delivery of high quality walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure, behaviour change initiatives and capability building measures. So we're now working across the department and with Active Travel England to develop a programme for using these funds. And we're drawing on the work that we've done through the LC WIP and the new MAPE development programme. So we're in the early stage of that at the moment, and it will take time. And it reminds me of our public transport network. 15 to 18 months ago, we were in a position where we had very, very little money, lots of aspirations for our bus service improvement plan. So the aspiration there was really there to deliver something transformational for Leicestershire in terms of passenger transport. However, we just didn't have the money. We've since had a significant amount of bus service improvement plan money. That's enabled us to really work up and develop network plans, work with the passenger user group forum, which is very similar to this forum in terms of getting their input, getting their valued feedback in terms of where the needs and desires and aspirations are. And we're now in the process of getting stuff on the ground, a real transformed network, passenger transport network on the ground now. There's services in Melton, there's new demand responsive transport provision in Melton now. We'll be moving into the harbour and rural Charnwood areas shortly as well. And it's really, really enabled us to do that. But that has taken time, and it will take time using this funding for active travel for us to make a difference going forward. But you know, what I would say is bear with us. We want to work with you as a forum. We want your feedback and input. We really value that, and that will help us make a difference for cycling and walking going forward. Okay, so let's kickstart today's agenda. Now, unfortunately, our Active Travel England representative was unable to join us today. It was due, but unfortunately unable to join us. However, we've got 3 speakers that are going to be giving us some really good updates on some really interesting subjects. First and foremost, my colleague, Assistant Director Jana Walker, will be providing an update on MAPES and LTP4. Ed William, my Access Manager for Public Rights of Way, will be giving us an update on our Public Rights of Way improvement plan, which is just currently out to engagement. And then we've got Bob Belm from the Harbour Forum. He will be giving a presentation on basically the work that they've been doing following the Legacy Grant to develop the Harbour Town School programme. And he'll be giving an update on that progress and how the grant is being used and the benefits of that. After each presentation, we will allow a couple of questions after each presentation, and following that, we'll then move over into the council forum around the back, where we've got a lot of officers with stalls that will be there to talk to you. You can raise more questions, have more detailed discussions with those officers. There'll be some workshops as well, building on a lot of the work we did at the last forum in terms of identifying opportunities for improvements on the cycle and walking network that you guys can feed into. So we'll be looking forward to that. The forum will end at 7 p.m. for those that are attending online, but obviously those here will be able to go into the members lounge for that further networking. If you have submitted a pre-submitted question when signing up for today's forum, you'll find the responses have been displayed in the members lounge, but there'll also be responses provided with the minutes of the meeting. I know there were some questions quite late in the day, so if there's not a response, we will work as quickly as we can to get a response provided, and that will be provided with the minutes of the meeting. Okay, so first and foremost, I'll hand you over to Jana, and she will give us a presentation on MAPES and LTP4. Over to you, Jana. Thank you.
Hello everyone, can you hear me okay? I can introduce myself nicely now. I realise that my introduction to some of you was to rudely shepherd you into the council chamber and get you to leave your tea and biscuits behind, so sorry about that. My name's Jana Walker. I'm Assistant Director for Highways and Transport. Really pleased to see so many of you coming back and sticking with us. As Lee said, our 3rd forum, I think we're hoping to have a little bit more of a settled funding profile and policy position from government and ourselves to work with to help make the most of these forums going forward. So I'm here today actually to stand in for my colleague Ben, who is the Manager for Transport Strategy and Policy, who's produced the Local Transport Plan 4. So I can't take credit for the work that's been done. Where am I pointing this one? Was it down there? Probably me. Just get that while I'm talking. So I'm just going to give you summaries. A number of you, I think, attending the forums also fed into the development of the local transport plan. You're going to do it on that. I get to do my best. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so the local transport plan, I mean, I don't know, I'm hoping those of you that are from my team in the room will be familiar with local transport plans, but does that mean anything to this forum at all? Pop your hand up if you're familiar with a local transport plan. Yeah. Does anybody feel it's does anything for them? There we go. Yeah, that'll be the test, won't it, of this one. So just for those of you that weren't so sure, local transport plan is effectively what we as a local transport and highway authority set out as our ambition. Obviously, you can set your own time period. We've tried to look at ours in a short, medium, and long-term process to kind of capture those things that we can do as quick wins, and those things all the way up to sort of new junctions on strategic roads that take 10, 20 years in the making. And what is different about this transport plan to the last transport plan we had? Last time we were preparing our transport plan, it was sort of off the back of the economic last economic crash, I suppose. They come round in cycles, don't they? And the focus of it was very much around delivering economic growth. So it was very much in line with the government way of funding things and testing value for money, which was really about journeys to work and how quick you could do your journey to work. It was less about things like health benefits, perhaps less about local economies and how people access perhaps their local cafe, shops, that type of thing. This ran a local transport plan, and thanks to the feedback that we've got from you and others across the county, is more about transport's role as enabler. So very much in terms of active travel as well. Might not just be about getting from A to B. And many of you, probably like us, your lives aren't about getting up in the morning, coming straight to work and going straight home. You perhaps have caring responsibilities, whether that's for family members, for children. You go and do your shopping, you do other bits. And what we're finding as well, sort of in a post-pandemic world, if we're still talking, in those terms, is that people's travel patterns are different as well. So what this local transport plan is about, very much more around how transport can help other wider aspects. So that would include health and well-being, the environment, still economic growth. We all still want to have jobs and be able to get to them, don't we? Also, one of the hot topics around our resilience of our transport network, and again, in terms of active travel, particularly the kind of condition of our footways, our cycleways, how well you can use them if there's plenty of rain coming down and where things are flooded. All of that makes a difference. And then also we're in a bit of a tipping point with climate as well, aren't we? Other things where there should be opportunities through technology to do things differently, to look try and embrace innovation. I don't know if you work with many local authorities, but we're not always known for our risk appetite and our desire to be the first to do something. And so this is, again, as part of what we've done with the local transport plan, is try and have a look at where those opportunities might be. And in fact, I would say an example we're going to have a look at, Bob's going to kind of take us through something different that's been done. And, we're hoping that there'll be more suggestions and more working with communities as we go through delivery of the transport plan. Probably used all my time up explaining that, sorry, so I'm going to be really quick. Now, just to be a super diva, I've slightly rearranged the order of these slides, which is slightly different to your printout, so sorry, but I just thought it was useful so people could kind of see as I move through how the LTP is structured is a kind of core document that sets out the broad principles of what we're going to be doing, and that's what we've adopted so far. Underneath that is what we've called focus strategies. Now, these things are very much in local government speak, aren't they? Nobody gets excited about something called a focus strategy, but they are things that we are doing where kind of having the broad principle isn't enough. And actually, one of the examples of that we'll come on to later is when we did the consultation for the local transport plan. I'd say almost a surprising number, but a number of people wrote to us and say that they actually felt excluded from the opportunity to use transport, whether all forms of transport, in a way to have a kind of equal access to other opportunities. So they might feel that transport, the way that they had access to transport, perhaps would prevent them from having as much social interaction as they wanted to, perhaps best value activities, that type of thing. And so one of the strategies we've got to talk about is inclusion in highways and transport. And then we've got so again, I was still struggling to get all this out in one go. Multimodal area investment plans. Now that is really a fancy way of saying that we're going to look at an area on its own merits and look at all the types of things you can do in highways and transport and make a plan that kind of is joined up. So you'll know, this forum will know that we talk about local cycling, walking infrastructure plans. I think that was a great initiative by government to kind of focus on that area of where we can get infrastructure in to support walking and cycling. But in isolation, you might be looking at measures that would also perhaps hinder the public transport network, make it less attractive to travel by bus or that sort of thing. So our job is to balance that out. So what we'll be doing is absolutely making use of things like local cycling, walking infrastructure plans, but in a joined up way with other initiatives in an area. And that is what those multimodal area investment plans are going to do. We'll talk about those a tiny little bit more, although Julia's going to keep me on track with the time. And then your county strategic investment plan is the same thing, but kind of like on a bigger scale. So things like, is the motorway network in Leicestershire, suitable for growth and things that we've got going forward, and it's a bigger scale of investment and things that would be on a county-wide scale. And then one thing, and I think it's fair to say that I think in local government thing, we're a bit sketchy at monitoring what we've done afterwards, because the money tends to be focused on the doing and then you move on to the next thing about doing. So we've really tried to think about how we could monitor the impact that we're having through this plan. Okay, so Ben would absolutely want me to say first and foremost that the core document that we've got has been adopted, so that feedback has happened. We've got that as a policy basis for moving forward, and why that's relevant particularly to the people who are interested in this forum is there is a heavy focus on health, on well-being, and on sort of connectivity at a local level, and that's all the things that sort of give a reason for active travel. And I'd say 2 minutes. Okay, right, let's get through this quick. I'd say one of the things that you might notice that we talk about, and I mentioned this before, is we might be able to justify investment in things more like leisure routes for walking and cycling than we would have done under the previous kind of way of judging things by journeys to work. And there's just on the slide, and you've got them there, that you might think, oh, here's another policy, here's another plan, why do they need it? We do absolutely need it to leverage in funding, to make sure that developers are doing what we want them to do in relation to things like active travel, make sure that we can work with partners, and that we've got a clear way of working and getting in money really for other things that we want to do. Just so you know, when I talked about those focus strategies, we have produced some alongside the development of the LCP. So we've got a road safety strategy, and I think again that interaction between pedestrians, cyclists, other vulnerable road users, and car or vehicles on the road is really critical to sort of people feeling like they've got the opportunity to take up active travel, and the road safety strategy picks up that. Of slightly less interest, but again something else that we have to, not less interest, I shouldn't say that, of less relevance to this forum, is the electric vehicle charging strategy as well. And then, so yeah, moving on from adopting that, we've talked about the focus strategies and the MAPEs. And if you just move on a slide, I think it will say a bit about what there's a bit of detail on the slides about what the focus strategies are, and also then what the multimodal investment plans are. And I've sort of tried to capture that in my introduction. But they will also try and help where we've got multimodal journeys happening. So, you might want to do something by bus. In order to normally access bus travel, you have to usually walk. So the two things are linked and thought of together. The list at the moment, we're focusing on the south of Leicester, Market Harbour and Hinckley in terms of our areas for multimodal investment plans. Part of that is where we've already got perhaps 106 funding to make the most of, local plans coming forward where we can influence the policy the most and kind of make sure that we're levering in developer funding. And also where we've got good evidence for that as well. As 2 minutes is up. Okay, so that was good. There you see, we're on the end. Sorry, I feel like I've raced through that a little bit, but I know some of you kind of heard the presentation on the local transport plan before and really just want to kind of focus on what we're going to be doing with it, hopefully on a practical and visible level going forward. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Am I allowed questions because of my poor timing? Yeah, we're allowed questions. Would anybody like to ask a question on that aspect? Hi, Rachel.
What I noticed is traffic, so the volume forecast for traffic in Leicestershire, and the LTP4 doesn't seem very ambitious to be able to mitigate some of that. Now, traffic, to my mind, big issue with traffic is locally, actually, in and around villages, getting from that side of the village to that side of the village, or that side of the community to that side of the community. And to me, that is a massive, potentially where the active travel really plays. It really plays getting into the shops, to the school, to the station or bus stop. And it's just not jumping out. It's not jumping out, but it will be a massive help with traffic reduction. And that's where we should start with local communities. You start with your active travel. How do we get people, instead of thinking car first into the shops from 500 yards away, how do we get them walking or cycling? And that's what I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing that sort of vision around it, and that's what I'd like to see more of.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we've sort of tried to make a bit of a change in our language around mode shift. I think we talked about this last time, in the sense that and maybe you all feel this as well. So I'm the Assistant Director for Highways and Transport. I should absolutely be making sustainable travel choices whenever I can, walking to places, taking public transport. But I've also got to get my kids to this place, and I've got to drop this off, and I've got to look after my mum, and I've got to pick up the shopping. So I'm going to take the car because I do all of these things. And so when you hear this thing about mode shift, should you cycle to work? Should you do this? You're being a bit bombarded by the message, and it doesn't seem accessible to you in that really big generic statement around you should change the way you travel. So I absolutely agree, and I think that's where although they've got a local government name, multimodal investment strategies, if you have a Harborough, I live in Harborough, so I'll say that now, Harborough strategy, that is going to look at what are people doing locally in Harborough about where they're driving when they could be walking, what stops them, which might be entirely different to an area like Loughborough. So in Loughborough, we have quite a big student population you'll be aware of, and the way in which those people might travel and what might encourage them to make maybe 2 or 3 different journeys a week will be different. So I agree. I think in this core document, you're not seeing something definite saying this is how we're going to change people's travel behaviours and how we're going to make that difference and reduce traffic in this way, because that is what we're going to do at a more local level. I think when we come around to doing the monitoring, we should probably have some more idea about how we can reduce traffic. But being really honest, when we came to see the evidence for the local transport plan for Leicestershire, you probably know when you look at the map, has got quite a big strategic road network. A lot of the traffic in Leicestershire doesn't actually originate, or its destination isn't in Leicestershire as well. So you kind of trying to pick where we can influence the most and make the most difference. And I agree with you. I think at a local level, I need to be quiet as well, because I don't know. But at a local level, that's where we can make the most start, I think, or make a start. Should we do that one first so I don't forget? Yeah. These people can wave at me a little bit more.
This question is from Wendy Bannerman, and it's: the images and language are very urban and do not represent vulnerable road users in the interurban and rural areas. How will this process make all highway users feel involved, valued and safe?
I think that's really good feedback, and actually I chair the Road Safety Partnership, and we talk about perhaps people riding horses and other vulnerable road users as well, that I agree probably don't feel represented by those graphics. So that's just useful feedback, and we'll take that on board. I think just sort of building on what I was saying before, I think the process by actually having interaction with our officers at an area level will help people feel more included. Hopefully we talked about this forum as well, making us less faceless as an organisation, that you recognise officers that work, on your behalf effectively in this area. And I think that's how we do it. I think perhaps as well, if we've not joined up our kind of road safety strategy with some of the way that we talk around active travel, that's feedback for us as well, because I think that is how we make sure that we include vulnerable road users. And also how we found out why people don't make active travel or other choices, because they feel that they can't because they're perhaps unsafe or not included. So I haven't really got, I realise that's more like it's a work in progress answer, but I think that is very much the case. And again, welcome any feedback from Wendy about any particular examples of where she perhaps feels excluded from that process.
One more question.
Oh, I will be around afterwards if there's anything particularly that I can help with.
This will be the last question.
Some of our local beauty spots in Leicestershire, Bradgate Park, the Outwoods, Beacon Hill, they're not served by public transport. The car parks get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they almost take away from the thing that people have gone to see. Have you any comment?
Yeah, you won't quite draw me on whether I think the car parks have ruined them and that sort of aspect of it, but I'm just looking at my colleague Emma, because that is exactly the sort of thing we are thinking about. And local transport plan 4 provides that. We basically, before, to be honest, we would have probably never prioritised linking up those routes under the last plan, because the way that benefits were assessed were all about journeys to work and that type of thing. This policy gives us the chance to do that. Oh, sorry, and we are including things like demand for popular destinations, beauty spots by public transport, and then thinking about how people access that. So we're at the beginning, I would say, of looking at that with any kind of real investment opportunity. But certainly, I think it's important. And you know, from a health and wellbeing perspective, my colleagues from health are here today. That, you know, how people access and enjoy those, and particularly, one of the things that we've looked at is equality of that opportunity, or equity in that opportunity. And again, I'm not saying that we've solved that and got everybody equal access to those, but it's certainly a factor in how we think about prioritising public transport and active travel going forward. So thank you. I better sit down, hadn't I, before I get told off.
Right, okay, so thank you for that, Jenna. So the next presenter, I'd like to call up Edwin McWilliam, who's going to talk us through the Rights of Way Improvement Plan. Edwin?
Thanks, Lee. Good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Edwin McWilliam. I'm the Access Officer with Leicestershire County Council. Been involved with the Rights of Way network since, I don't know, what, Saxon times, would you say? Something like that. It's been a long time. But this is one of our refresh periods, actually, where you stand back a little bit and sort of think, well, what on earth are we doing? What's best to do? And how do we go about doing that? How do we actually manage that network? Oh, we're on this slide already. Right. That's, if you go to the previous slide, that's our traditional view of Leicestershire, certainly before Google Maps anyway, but still on Google Maps. And that's what we'd normally think of the highways network. Those are all the carriageways that people do drive around, and they're going to between A and B. If you go on to the next slide, that mass of, well, it doesn't show up two ways, those green sways, those are public rights of way, which are also public highways as well and make up part of the highways network. In fact, it's about 43% of the highways network is actually public rights of way as opposed to public carriageways. That shows what extensive network it is to look after and enjoy. Sometimes, my colleagues here are sick of me saying this for the last, whatever, 30 years, do you reckon, Piers, I've said it? But trying to get across the scale of that network that we actually have to go out and look after day in, day out. If that was a linear path, that's a linear path that we have to maintain between Leicester and Moscow. It's a fair old chunk of routes that we're required to look after. The arrows down the bottom left for you, those are really the statuses of the, I'll just concentrate on the first three really. Yellow arrows, when you see them walking around, they're public footpaths. Just as they designate. In fact, footpaths are actually 80% of the network. And that's, if you're on foot, you get to enjoy 100% of the network because you can go on any types of the rights of way. If you're a horse rider or a cyclist, you can only try out a little bit less than that. The next is the blue for the bridleways, and finally the red arrows for byways. And indeed, there are some carriageways which are public rights of way. And they cause us lots of headaches. I was going to say from time to time, but pretty constantly now. Next slide. Right, there you go. There's our network lengths, which I should refer to by clicking across. You see, for walkers, it's fine. But in fact, it's quite a fragmented network for riders and cyclists. They actually have to use a lot of the carriageway network as well, and that could be very challenging for them in linking from one particular linear route to another linear route. Okay, next slide. Right, just to make the message, these are all rights of way. Rights of way can consist, and this is what I suppose most people's imagination is of public rights of way, going across a field in a very rural situation. In the top left-hand corner, beneath there's a duty way in a market town somewhere in Leicestershire with a sealed surface, and that's a public right of way just as much. There are long flights of steps on some of them. There are also signage which coincides with some of our larger cycleway networks and our cycle signage taking people from A to B. And there is a whole host of bridges. The top bridge there is one, I think that's out at Knowsley, which needs a bit of TLC. Down the bottom, a very big bridge over the Midland Main Line. We'll be working with the railway company for its electrification and the removal of level crossings in that. And again, on the right-hand side, there's a very mixed range of particular types of users, which really I've just tried to mention about. It's a funny thing of, but you know, we always live where we live. Our particular context for legal situation is England. Therefore, we have the joys of English land law, all the pluses and all the minuses associated with it. And when you actually look at a map of the public rights of way in the county, and you sort of think, oh, where can I actually go? As a private individual, you can wander around your property as a freeholder, or you might be a leaseholder, or you might go to one of the parks that's been mentioned a bit earlier, be it Bradgate and Beacon. But if you really want to experience the wider environment, the wider outdoors, if you like, well, you need to actually utilise the rights of way network, because it's the only place you can go. You can't go anywhere else. That is it, if you want to be in a non-traffic situation. And I think for many people, that's the thing they very much enjoy and appreciate. That also occurs just as much in urban areas as well, where again, we've got a number of urban paths, but they provide non-trafficked routes in those urban areas and are very popular as a result in those urban areas. Okay, next slide. So I've mentioned the rights of way improvement plan, and the bottom line which we're asked to look at is try and understand what the needs are of the public, and I suppose ourselves as managers of the network, both now and looking into the future. Now, I'm going to say it's not rocket science, actually, some of that, in that the needs now are very similar to the needs 10 years ago, very similar to 20 years ago. However, there are different pressures on us in terms of delivering services and doing things within those contexts. We also need to experience and enjoy some of the trying to bring in finance and monies to try and do some of the things we would like to do. There are two aspects you can do at this such an early stage, one of which is the questionnaire, which is a series of set questions as it defines. Please do go in and fill that in on the website, and I think there's some information after half time where you can actually find out information on that. And there is also a mapping tool which allows you to pinpoint and point out where you would like to see specific improvements or other things dealt with in terms of the network. Quite often, and I'm told quite often that we have a finite resource, we have a finite budget, we have a finite all sorts of ways of dealing with that. But it's very important to be able to attract funding and be able to attract outside funding into ourselves to actually do things. And I think some of those ideas can be very, very good ideas. Lee, a bit earlier on, has talked about very large sums of money coming in just this year in terms of walking, cycling. We hope to see that extending out year on year, but we need a menu list to actually pull down from to actually make bids and actually try and get funding back over to the county. It's very, very important. This is your chance to actually say, actually, this is what I need. And again, ideas such as the bus services to the country parks, something that was quite dear to me years ago, very good in terms of that. I just wanted to flag up a couple more things which I think are very important about not just rights of way, but in terms of why we're here tonight. Not least, and I know you would have gone through this on many occasions, but you know, the Chief Medical Officer about 2011, I think, was the big report. There's been subsequent reports since there. The difference between sitting on your backside day in, day out, I'm referring to myself here, and actually getting out there and actually walking to a shop walking to a school, taking the children to a school, walking, dare I say, out into the countryside, and your actual health. That is the biggest thing, literally the biggest thing you can do. There are no drugs that the NHS can give you on a day-to-day or a weekly basis that can match the benefits the Chief Medical Officer states in relation to that exercise. The other thing is, sorry, I'm going to go off onto the National Health Service, so I'm looking at the time. When the National Health Service it's kind of formed, it took a while to form, but it wasn't envisaged quite as we see it today. It was seen in a more open, honest way. Certainly, I wouldn't normally quote Nye Bevan, but he was the minister at the time when things were signed. But the key that they were saying at that time is that 50% of effort and funding should be spent on preventative care, 50% on actually treating problems. Somehow those two have become hugely imbalanced. And actually something that can really help with that balance is just what the Chief Medical Officer is trying to do in terms of that. Okay. I think, how long have I got? 2 minutes? It's always 2 minutes, isn't it? I think I've covered the main thing I was going to say, but it is an opportunity for having your say. Let's have a look at the next slide. Oh, yes, the questionnaire. We do want your views on this, and the questionnaire will compare questions and answers today with when we last did the Rights of Way Improvement Plan, and that'll be very interesting and something we feed back into. I have to say, we also get a lot of feedback, shall I say, I'll describe it as feedback from our customers in terms of reports to us. We get about 2,000 reports plus each year to ask us, could something be done at A and B, but we'll be putting those together and seeing what can be actually done and look at our processes in relation to that. Coming back to the scale, we have an awful lot to do, but those feedbacks will be very important to us, and I really hope you do actually fill that in. Next slide. And just coming back, finally reiterating the point of the social pinpoint map, a map-based online engagement tool that allows you to actually leave comments on specific points or areas in that, and think, if you can, beyond the box. It can be a wider issue. It can be the idea of a bridge. It can be the idea of a link. It can be, could you do something in relation to this? We need some feedback from you to know what you think in terms of that. But just to underline that point, we won't have forgotten all those 20,000 reports we received since the last Rights of Way Improvement Plan. So we'll pick on that, and that's something we will be looking at when we look to actually manage that network for you. You know, we have 7,000 finger posts at the start of each post. We have 15,000 of the yellow waymarker posts you see. I think it's about guest. This last one's guest, I have to say. About 40,000 waymarkers that we keep up. Then there's always keeping the paths clear and working with owners and occupiers to do that, with overhanging vegetation, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things to do there. But I think within that, and the context of what you'll be giving feedback, especially for the pinpoint, there are certain things that attract more people. And just to finish off in terms of that, COVID wasn't a very nice thing, but it was a bit of an eye-opener for me in that I don't think it should have been an eye-opener, but when there's a lot of people at home wondering what to do, they start walking their local paths. And all of a sudden, we get a lot more contact from the public during the COVID period than at other periods. And we see a very large jump in that. And that actually shows us a lot of interest. The other thing is, people quite often think of the reports we get as being very remote, people rambling away in the middle of nowhere. In fact, more than half of our reports are within a mile of the person who's reporting at their home. That's the majority of reports and feedback we get from the public occurs literally from their doorstep. And that's where they will be going from, their doorstep in terms of that. So I'll finish off there, but please do fill in the questionnaire and the pinpoint item.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Just to confirm, how long is that period of time open for them giving that feedback? It was launched last week, wasn't it? It was open last week.
I think it now runs for, you have, what's the date today? You've got another 2 weeks, basically.
Another 2 weeks for that feedback. Till 16th of March,
Yeah.
Thank you, Jess. And of course, that then will help inform our Rights of Way Improvement Plans, a draft of which we'll produce, and then that will go out to a wider consultation once that draft has been formulated. Okay.
You've got a special room for that, haven't you? Jess, you need to use a mic so the people online.
We've got the survey open and we've got access to Social Pinpoint in Goscott. So come and see me after, and you can fill it out here, here and now for us, or ask us any questions. So yeah, please do come and see us.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Jess. Are we allowed a question or two, Julie? 3 minutes. Any questions? Edwin.
I'd like to understand the relationship between Sustrans and yourself. I ask specifically because in our neighbourhood, within a mile of our house, there's Sustrans Route 6. And I can't find anyone who actually claims any ownership to it in terms of maintenance. That's Sustrans or yourselves. And so I'm trying to get to the bottom of where does that fit into the transport policy and who actually signs up to actually maintain it, because at the moment it's not in a fit state to commute on.
I'd just say in those terms, Sustrans is obviously a national organisation that is promoting cycling, but also has its own recommended national cycle network. Now, Sustrans itself, when it's planning those particular routes, tries, I know they do try, to plan those routes around local highways that are actually maintained by local authorities. So it's a bit like, the A1 going through Rutland. Well, yeah, it's in Rutland, but it is the A1 as well. And the NCN6, etc., does exactly that. So we work in tandem with that. The other aspect to that is that Sustrans did recognise a couple of years ago that there were holes in their network, shall we say, in terms of that being a comprehensive network that has ongoing maintenance and into the future. And they have been undergoing a very, very big survey in relation to that, trying to make sure that all the routes that they promote are in fact part of the local highway network or directly owned by them. Some routes are owned by Sustrans themselves, they've actually done as well. How far that work's got with that particular route, I don't know, but if you drop me a line, I'm quite happy to look into that specifically for you, no problem.
Okay. Thank you, Edwin. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned about obviously the benefits of going out and walking, maybe more so during the pandemic. And I just think in relation to the first speaker as well, thinking about multimodal transport and maybe using the train so that you can maybe cycle part of the way to work or walk. Those options are often longer, more expensive and less convenient than public transport. So how do we, from a behaviour change point of view, start to solve that conflict with people putting the health benefits into action when the way of doing that is less convenient for them on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm glad you gave me such an easy question there. I'm going to think into it. What I would say is young people, youth, they're absolutely everything in society. Nobody else matters, really. It is just young people that matter. They're the future. They're the things that are going to be producing goods and services into the future and actually generating, therefore, more little young people and other aspects. I have seen a fundamental shift in the way in which younger people and younger officers, for instance, at our workplace, think about these things. It may be a little thing. It may be that suddenly, oh God, they're all bringing water bottles. Why are they doing that? Well, there is a reason for that, because they've been reading up on the health. And the other aspects in terms of those younger people, both exercising more, being out more, I've seen a tremendous progress in certain sectors. To me, that's the future. It's a long-term future, and it has to start with young people and so on. I'm very passionate actually about schools and collection of schools. I've reached the stage, I was going to say sadly, but clearly this isn't sadly, it's a good thing, where I pick up a grandchild or two, and it's really interesting. I was trying to analyse this the other day, in that all these parents now have to turn up. Yeah, in my day, which was quite a while ago, to be honest with you, everyone just left the school and walked home. There was no blooming parent collection. And again, it was a very interesting theme how in societal terms there was this big protection thing with. But having said that, I try to think of a more positive thing, because I sort of think, well, actually, I'm walking my grandson back all the way from school to there, making sure he is walking. But from my perspective, in terms of what's rolled out, what's given out, it's you can change young people. I'm not sure you can change older people.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I would not want to disagree with my colleague Edwin under any circumstances, but I would just like to say that I think we are thinking about how I agree in terms of the biggest benefits will come from behaviour change over a lifetime in terms of younger people, but I think what we are talking about is everybody being part of that, and I think I don't have the specific answer to like I've nailed it. It's going to be more convenient, and everybody will make different choices. But I think what we are looking at is perhaps asking people to make 1 or 2 different choices a week, or, you know, rather than, I don't know about you, but motive and behaviour change messages a few years ago were about you can cycle to work, you can do this, not what could you do once a week a bit differently, what could you do that? And I think this thing about kind of understanding how people's lives work now, we've seen in terms of transport patterns that more journeys happen in the middle of the day. Perhaps people are working from home more, they'll pop out to the shops in their lunch hour more locally than they would have done, those sorts of things. So I think part of what we're doing is to have a look at everybody making a small change where the convenience is not such a big change that you can't do it, and build from there. And I think the other thing we're doing as well is not just sort of targeting you and me as individuals, but things like, can businesses be more, you know, can your employer encourage and incentivize you? Can they have a bit more flexibility about what time you arrive at work if it means that you can drop the kids off and walk or cycle to work rather than having to fit all of those things in? So I think it is a really big challenge. And I think while it's really hard to be the one, isn't it, that's half an hour later that needs to shower when they get to work if that isn't the culture at your organisation, or everybody turns up to school, you know, in a Range Rover, and you're going to make your child walk home. It's hard to be those ones that break the trend. So I think the community-based projects, perhaps we're going to hear a little bit about in a minute, can sort of make it more relatable, more doable for people, and then they start to make small changes. But I don't think it's an easy one, bit like climate change. You know, again, it's perhaps a bit more costly and a bit more time consuming to make the right choices for those things. So, but if you've got any ideas as well, chuck them in when we go for the next section. Sorry.
I'd better go. I felt out of my depth with that question. Now we've moved on to climate change. I feel really out of my depth. But yeah, thanks for that. And as pointed out there, in terms of for our experience, COVID was a real eye opener. If people were based at home, they did they get involved with the services they had around there. I've got to go. I'm getting the wave. I've got the wave. I've got to go.
Yeah, as Jana there gave us a nice segue into the work of the Harbour Forum, so I'll quickly hand over to Bob. Bob.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jenna, actually, for the introduction really into what I'm going to talk about, which is making lots of small scale changes and about local inputs as well. So Market Harbour Active Travel Revolution. Who are we? Well, we're a very small group of volunteers. In fact, you know, three of the 6 of us, 4 of the 6 of us are here tonight. But our work stems from developing neighbourhood plans. In Market Harbour, we've got 4 neighbourhood plans. And in going out and talking to residents, one of the key concerns that comes across time and time again is concern about the amount of traffic. We know that the county carried out a study 8 years ago, and it determined that more than a third of the trips within Market Harbour were internal trips, and yet, as a small market town, we're quite compact. You can walk from any part of town into the centre in 15 minutes. You can cycle from one side to the other in 15 minutes. Okay, so need to click through these. So what we decided we'd do was to set out with the objective of trying to reduce the numbers of car journeys for short trips in town. And we can't change the world overnight. We're only going to change things in a small way, bit by bit. But what we decided to focus on was schools and school travel. We all know from our lived experience what the chaos is around the school run. We all know what the impact is, you know, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 and 4 in the afternoon. You know, we know from studies elsewhere that up to 50% of traffic on the road at those times is actually on the school run. But we wanted our project to be data-led. Ouch. So we set off first to do qualitative study. Kevin, who's a marketing consultant, led that with a slightly different approach, which is really great. And we went off and interviewed students and pupils and their parents and staff. We did some ethnography, which is going out and meeting parents over breakfast and accompanying them and their kids as they walked or cycled or drove to school. And really that has informed everything that we've done since. It established for us the appetite for change. It established also just how stressful it was for parents. Every day was, felt like a mission getting the kids to school. So parents fall into three groups. There are those who are committed active travel enthusiasts and will do that come what may. At the other extreme, you've got parents who either can't because they've got onward journeys to make, or won't because for lots of reasons won't get out of their cars. And then there's a group in the middle who are receptive to change, okay? And who perhaps can be influenced through a program of behavior change initiatives. So our goals were threefold. One was to make it easier and safer, healthier, less stressful for all parents, no matter how they travelled at the moment. So not just to pick on those driving their SUVs to school. We determined that we had to offer incentives and encouragement rather than enforcement. We wanted to use more carrot than stick. And we wanted our program to be data-led. Every school is different. We're able to use our own local experience and our local knowledge to determine your next steps. So we talked to Home Run, and they have a school travel evaluation platform. What that does is, what it can do is to use just postcode data. So it maps out where the parents are traveling from, and it makes, through the analysis, some assumptions about how they might travel and what the potential is for them to shift their mode, okay? What we did in addition to that, we carried out a survey, and we asked parents to fill a survey in. We had more than 800 responses. In fact, we had 53% of parents in Market Harborough respond to the survey, which is a fantastic result, partly because we engaged with the schools and with the head teachers and their admin staff, partly also because I think there's an appetite from parents to get involved, okay, and to put their comments forward. And that analysis will be with us. We hoped we were going to have it tonight. It's not quite ready, but we'll have that within 2 weeks. So, benefit of the survey, we had 400 comments back from parents telling us how they travelled at the moment. There were some fairly obvious and expected conclusions about the chaos, the conflicts outside the school gates. There were also requests for safe crossings and school crossing patrols and zebra crossings. The one perhaps surprise was the request for journey share. We said 22% of people share journeys at the moment, not all of them car drivers, of course, but there was another 33% who would consider sharing their journey to school. And I think that in itself, we believe, has got huge potential. So in terms of the next steps, we're going to be developing school travel plans. We want to do that fairly quickly by the end of this year. They're all going to be slightly different, but they all have very similar component parts to them. And so park and stride sites and making the most of that will be part of it. Developing nature trails to get people from those parking sites to schools is something we want to try and do. We want to set up coffee vans outside schools as an encouragement to parents who do walk or scoot. We've got the WOW tracker now in 3 schools, and that will make a difference. We want to carry out some air quality monitoring as well. So Harbour District Council have given us the use of a Zephyr monitor, and we're going to be setting that up outside of school, and we're going to be working with the county on Clean Air Day on the 19th of June at Farnham Fields Primary School, where there's going to be a road closure, and we're going to monitor before, during and after. School streets is another possibility. We've got our eyes on a couple of sites. Now that the county can enforce moving traffic violations and school streets can be enforced through ANPR, then it makes it much easier than instead of asking parents or teachers to stand outside with barriers, much easier to do. So I know there are revenue implications of that as well, but that's a real possibility. And journey share as well. And Home Run, the company doing the survey, have an app, and that will link parents up and identify opportunities to share journeys. And we're really positive about that. So this is just a start. We said we'd start with primary schools, although secondary schools, we're actively working with them. It's a long-term project. We know Brightways in Kettering have been going for 20 years doing similar things. It is a long-term project. Businesses, will be next on our list. So I'm going to finish by posing 3 questions, 3 challenges, perhaps. Okay. First is that there are lots of bodies involved in doing this. Choose How You Move do a fantastic amount of work, but we have Living Streets, we've got Sustrans involved, Harper District Council involved, the South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership as well. All of them at different times with different individual interventions. Would we be more effective if we could join them all up and coordinate them? First question. Second one, safety is absolutely paramount. People aren't going to leave their cars at home and walk or cycle if they're forced to travel on unsafe routes. So the question really is, should we be integrating behaviour change initiatives with infrastructure improvements? ATE gave evidence to government at the end of January, and they said just that. It was far more effective if you combine behaviour change and infrastructure improvements. Should our LC whips have school travel play a bigger part rather than focusing on commuter routes? And then third, community groups. We're really encouraging to hear what Jana and others have said about local groups having an involvement. I really do believe that this is a future. That there are more than 300 primary schools in the county. There's another 120 secondary schools. The Choose How You Move team are very small. They're very stretched. So can community groups like ours work in partnership with Choose How You Move and work together more effectively so we can provide some local knowledge and local inputs with a vested interest in making it work and work together more effectively? And that's me.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Bob. And yeah, what you're doing as a community group, absolutely fantastic. And as you say, combining and working in partnership with the Choose How You Move team to tackle what has been, is a long-standing problem of parking congestion outside school and safety issues outside. Something that we've been working hard to try and address for many years. And as we were discussing outside in the members' lounge, it's tiny steps, but I think the work that you guys are doing, is leading the way and is a good example then for others to follow in terms of working in partnership with ourselves going forward. I'm conscious of time again, but is there anyone online? Let's come to it. Is anyone online got any questions they'd like to ask Bob before I come to the room? Online, Robin.
We've got one from Claire Scott. Do Market Harbour, Active Travel Revolution, or schools or other organisations and groups provide education to parents about the use of electric scooters for children to travel to school?
Electric scooters, blank faces amongst the team. We haven't really addressed that. Not electric scooters. Yeah, go on, please. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, in terms of electric scooters on the in terms of being able to use them on the highway, we're not a trial area in Leicestershire, so there isn't sort of the the facility to do that at the moment in terms of on those routes that we're talking about at the minute. It's probably why that information's not been provided in a kind of encouraging way, if that's sort of where the question was coming from. If that helps, probably just why it's not coming into your remit at the moment. I'm obviously wheeling to school as part of the education and safety programme around that. So I think that's probably why that's not been discussed at the moment. And it will be something I think that kind of comes up as we go into the future, really.
Yeah. I think scooting to school, the feedback we get is that it's really popular. Kids love it. It'd be better if we had better surface footways at times, I'm sure. But I think there's a real appetite for that. Far more so than cycling. Very, very few primary school kids cycle to school.
Yeah, majority of them. Yeah, scoot, as you say. No, really good challenging question. Any questions in the room? Yes, sir.
Line the whole thing about making behavioural change, coupling that with real change, therefore, recognising the agency of make good choice if they're in the room. If we just move away from the town focus to a more distributed, widely distributed, we see some consistent themes in, say, readdressing electric-free transport from centres to structures. Also, thinking of that lovely point there about ensuring parking, maybe sort of multimodal and healthy choice. Could we think also about people who are travelling, say, 4 miles, 6 miles by bike, local train station? Again, not just stage one, further education. So in those circumstances, we secure well monitored, possibly with things like cafes, real service traffic.
I could come in on that, Bob, if you'd like. Yeah, it's part of our passenger transport network review. That's all the sort of stuff that we're trying to bring in. We're looking at multimodal hubs, to do exactly what you were just saying there. We're also looking at demand responsive transport provision, which can link in with scholar movement, try and get scholars onto those vehicles. Electric vehicles, that's the next step along. Currently doing Zebra, zero emission bus fleets, and we've just been awarded some money to do a number of electric buses around Loughborough and whereabouts as well. It links services to Melton as well, so we're starting to see that come to fruition from funding there. So we are looking at those sorts of things. Again, it will take some time.
We lost school buses. That were made by people essentially.
I think just one quick thing about buses. In Market Harborough for secondary school students, we've got 139 secondary school students who travel from Kettering and Desborough. There is a bus. It gets in 10 minutes too late. Okay, at the moment. So that's hopefully something that the public transport review has picked up. We've talked to Emma about that, I know. But I think there is potential for secondary schools, students in particular, to actually use public transport to get, to travel, because the alternative is to travel by car.
Okay. Time up, Julie, is it? Okay. Thank you very much, Bob. Okay. So that just leads me to say a big thank you to all of our presenters today, Bob, Edwin and Jana. So really appreciate that. Thank you to those that are in attendance online. That does close the forum for you guys online. All of the questions that have been raised will be minuted, so you'll have the opportunity to review those. If there are any questions that were unanswered, please feed them through, and we'll aim to get those answered for you and attached to the minutes of this meeting, and they'll be available online. So yeah, if we've missed a question from you online, please, yeah, as I say, just forward those on, and we'll endeavour to get those answered for you. Okay, and this won't be the last. This will be hopefully the first of many forums that we run going forward. You know, with the MAPEs that we're currently doing, we'll be looking to get a lot of input from you know, forums like this to really drive them forward, run through concepts, very similar to what the City Council do at the moment, run through those concepts and get that input and that feedback from you. So really big thank you to all of you for your attending. So those online, I'll say goodbye now. Those here can now go through to the members lounge and speak with officers and see, you know, all the good work that's going on, and do a bit of networking and also important feedback into the MAPEs work that we're doing. So thank you very much all. Take care.